"Dad, I think it's best if you don't come to the wedding reception." My daughter, Ellie, said this to me, her future husband, Sebastian, nodding beside her. They said my presence would be awkward. I just smiled, went home, and made a single phone call. Not to my daughter, not to her fiancé. I called the one man Sebastian was desperate to impress, a man he didn't know was my closest friend. My daughter thought she was just uninviting her embarrassing book-selling father. She had no idea she was actually canceling her entire future. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The silence that followed Ellie's pronouncement was more deafening than any argument could have been. We were sitting in a restaurant so modern and minimalist, it felt sterile, a place of sharp angles and cold surfaces. It was Sebastian's choice, of course. My daughter, Ellie, had once loved cozy, cluttered cafes that smelled of old paper and roasted coffee. This version of her, the one sitting across from me in a severe cream-colored dress, felt like a stranger wearing her face. Her words, meant to sound considerate, were honed to a razor's edge. "It's just the guests, Dad." She had stammered, unable to meet my gaze as she pushed a single lonely scallop around her plate. "They're Sebastian's world. Investors. Clients. It's a different crowd. We just don't want things to be awkward." Sebastian, her fiancé, had placed a patronizing hand on her arm, a gesture of feigned comfort that was really one of control. "What Ellie means, Henry, is that we want to avoid any social dissonance. The wedding is a crucial networking opportunity. It's the official launch of our brand as a couple. We need to project a unified, polished image. A unified image. A brand." The clinical corporate language he used to describe a marriage made my skin crawl, and this brand apparently did not include a quiet 65-year-old widower who ran an old bookshop. It didn't matter that the bookshop had put her through private school. It didn't matter that the profits from selling first editions had paid for her art history degree. In their new polished world, my life's work had been relegated to a liability, an embarrassment. I simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. To do so would have been to accept their premise, that my presence was something to be negotiated. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my uneaten meal, and paid for my share of the dinner, a point of pride I never relinquished. Then I stood up. "I understand completely," I said, my voice even. "You must protect the brand. I wish you both a very successful launch." I walked out into the cool night air, leaving them in their world of cold surfaces and calculated alliances. The pain was a physical thing, a cold weight in my chest. But as I drove home, a different feeling began to seep in. Something hot and sharp pushing up through the grief. It was anger. A righteous, focused anger I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about being uninvited. It was the casual dismissal of my entire existence, of the world I had built for her, the world she was now so desperate to escape. My apartment, a place she now considered cramped and dusty, was my sanctuary. It was a fortress built not of stone, but of stories. Floor-to-ceiling shelves overflowed with books, the air thick with the scent of aging leather and paper. This was where I had raised her after her mother, my beloved Sarah, passed away from cancer. We didn't have much money then, but we had everything. That mattered. We had poetry and history, adventure and philosophy. I read to her every night, my voice filling the small apartment with tales of dragons and detectives, of star-crossed lovers and fallen kings. Her imagination was our greatest treasure, a kingdom we explored together. She had loved it then. She had loved the feel of a first edition in her hands, the thrill of discovering a hidden inscription in a forgotten classic. She wanted to be a curator, a historian, someone who preserved beautiful things. Her dream was to work at a place like the Morgan Library, surrounded by the tangible history of human thought. But then came college, and a new set of friends whose parents owned yachts and summer homes. The stories I offered suddenly weren't enough. She craved a different kind of narrative, one written in designer labels and European vacations. She met Sebastian during an internship at an investment firm. He was everything I was not: loud, slick, and obsessed with the acquisition of wealth as an end in itself. He saw art not as something to be loved, but as an asset class. He saw Ellie not as a woman with a brilliant mind, but as a stepping stone. With her art history degree and burgeoning career at a prestigious gallery, she was his key to a world of wealthy, cultured investors he couldn't access on his own. I watched as the daughter I knew began to fade, her vocabulary shifting from provenance and patronage to brand synergy and upward mobility. She became a perfect reflection of his ambition, hollowed out and polished to a high shine. I understood the desire for security, for a life easier than the one I had provided. But I never imagined it would come at the cost of her soul. On the large oak table in the center of my living room, surrounded by stacks of books waiting to be cataloged, lay my wedding gift for her. It had taken me 6 months of searching, of calling in favors from dealers in London and Paris, and a significant portion of my retirement savings to acquire it. It was a true first edition, first printing of Sarah's favorite novel, Wuthering Heights, published in 1847 under the pseudonym Ellis Bell. It wasn't just a book. It was a relic of our family. Inside the front cover was a faded, elegant inscription from Sarah's own grandmother, dated 1852. It read, "For my dearest granddaughter, may you find a love as fierce as the Moors, but a fate far kinder." This book was a piece of their lineage, a testament to a love of stories passed down through generations of strong, intelligent women. I had spent weeks carefully restoring the binding, my old, steady hands treating the fragile pages with a reverence born of a lifetime of loving books. This gift was my attempt to reach the Ellie I remembered, the girl who would have wept with joy at its significance. It was a reminder of where she came from, of the mother who had adored her, of a love that had nothing to do with stock portfolios or networking opportunities. But as I stood in my silent apartment, the cold reality settled. The woman who had uninvited me from her own wedding reception would not see a priceless heirloom. She would see an old, dusty book. She would see it as an anchor to the very world she was trying to scrub from her identity. Her rejection of me was a rejection of this book, a rejection of her mother, a rejection of her own history. And in that moment, the pain in my chest finally, irrevocably, turned to steel. My hand was steady as I reached for the phone. There was no rage, no desire for petty revenge. There was only the cold, clear focus of a man who had been pushed too far. I didn't call Alistair first. That would be the final move, the checkmate. A good strategist lays the groundwork first, gathering intelligence, securing alliances. My first call was to a number I had found some months ago, tucked away in the back of a file in my old roll-top desk. It was research I had done after a particularly unsettling conversation with Ellie about her fiancé, a conversation where she had casually dismissed his previous long-term relationship as unimportant. The number belonged to a woman named Jessica Marlowe. Jessica was the woman Sebastian had been engaged to for 2 years before he met my daughter. According to Ellie's carefully edited version of history, the breakup had been amicable, a mutual decision. They just wanted different things, she had told me vaguely, a little too quickly. But my instincts, honed by a lifetime of reading between the lines of dusty manuscripts and spotting forgeries, told me there was more to the story. People like Sebastian Croft didn't amicably part ways. They conquered and discarded. A cautious voice answered on the third ring. "Hello?" It was hesitant, already braced for an unwanted sales call or a scam. "Ms. Marlowe," I began, my voice calm and polite, the voice of a harmless old man. "My name is Henry Clark. I apologize for the late hour. I believe you were once acquainted with a Mr. Sebastian Croft." The silence on the other end was heavy with suspicion, thick with unspoken history. "Who is this? What do you want?" "I am the father of his current fiancée, Eleanor Clark," I said, "and I have reason to believe that my daughter is about to make a terrible mistake. I was hoping you might be willing to tell me your side of the story. The real one." It took some convincing. She was wary, scarred by her experience, and had no reason to trust a stranger on the phone. But as I spoke, not with accusation, but with a quiet, shared understanding of being on the receiving end. Of Sebastian's ambition, I felt her defenses begin to lower. I told her about the dinner, about being uninvited, about the cold, corporate language they used to describe their marriage. I didn't have to offer her anything. I just offered her a listening ear, something she probably hadn't had in a long time. The story she told was ugly and achingly familiar. She had been a freelance graphic designer, talented and passionate, with a small but successful business she had built from scratch. She had supported Sebastian through the early, lean years of his career when he was just another junior broker, with big dreams. She had believed in him, celebrated his small victories, designed his first business cards for free, and loved him with a fierce loyalty he had done nothing to earn. Their relationship ended the moment he met Ellie at a gallery opening. "He saw her, and it was like a switch flipped," Jessica said, her voice tight with remembered pain. "He didn't see a woman. He saw an opportunity. A manager at a prestigious gallery, connections to a world of old money and art investors he was, desperate to enter. I was suddenly insufficient. My life, my career, my love, it was no longer good enough for his brand. The breakup wasn't amicable. It was a strategic demolition. He had systematically dismantled her confidence, calling her work small time and her ambitions quaint. He had made her feel like a failure, like an obstacle to his greatness. He left her not just with a broken heart, but with a shattered sense of self-worth and a mountain of debt from a shared apartment he had abandoned. It was a pattern of behavior I was beginning to recognize. The complete and utter disposal of people who were no longer useful to him. "Why are you telling me this, Mr. Clark?" she asked finally, her voice raw. "What do you want from me?" "I want justice for you, Ms. Marlowe," I said simply. "And I want to save my daughter from him, even if she doesn't want to be saved. I believe men like Sebastian Croft should not be allowed to build their empires on the wreckage of good people. His wedding is tomorrow, and I intend to stop it." "How?" she asked, a flicker of something I hadn't heard before. Not hope, but a grim, renewed strength in her voice. "I have a friend," I said. "A man who values character and stories above all else. And I think it's time he heard a true story about his potential new business partner." I asked Jessica if she would be willing to meet me at the gallery the next morning, to be there, to be a living testament to Sebastian's character. She agreed without a moment's hesitation. With the first piece in place, I made the second call, the one that mattered. I dialed the private number for Alistair Finch's estate. His personal assistant, a man of terrifying efficiency named Graves, answered with his customary clipped tone. "Mr. Finch's residence?" "Graves, it is Henry Clark. Would you be so kind as to inform Alistair that I am calling?" There was a brief pause, then Alistair's familiar booming voice came on the line, full of warmth that could melt glaciers. "Henry, my friend, to what do I owe the pleasure? Don't tell me you finally located that first edition of Moby Dick with the typo on page 87? "Something far more interesting, I'm afraid, Alistair," I said. "It concerns a young man named Sebastian Croft." I heard Alistair sigh, a sound like gravel turning over. "Ah, yes, the ambitious young man from the gallery. Your daughter's young. Man, if I recall from your last letter, he's been trying to get a meeting with me for months. A rather persistent fellow. Graves has become quite adept at fending him off. Indeed. So persistent, in fact, that he has encouraged my daughter to uninvite me from her own wedding reception tomorrow, lest my humble profession as a bookseller cause him social dissonance. The line went utterly silent. Alistair was a man who understood nuance, but he also had a visceral working-class hatred for snobbery and disrespect. He was a self-made man who had never forgotten his roots, and he considered the act of disowning one's own family for social gain to be the ultimate moral failure. He did what? Alistair's voice was dangerously quiet now, all the warmth gone, replaced by something cold and hard as iron. He and my daughter believe my presence would be an embarrassment, I continued. I find myself in a peculiar position. I possess a wedding gift for them, a rather remarkable book that tells a story of passionate, destructive love. And I also possess another story, a true one, about ambition, cruelty, and the character of the man who is trying so desperately to manage your fortune. I have now completed the second 1,000-word section of Part 2. The plan is now in motion, the allies are in place, and the trap is being set. Alistair was quiet on the other end of the line for a long moment. I could almost hear him connecting the dots, the mind that could dissect a hostile takeover, now dissecting this small domestic betrayal with the same ruthless clarity. He wasn't just my friend. He was a man who saw the world as a series of stories, and he hated stories with cowardly, dishonorable protagonists. Henry, he said finally, his voice like steel. You and I have been friends for 15 years. We have shared our thoughts on life, death, and literature. Any man who would disrespect you disrespects me. It seems Mr. Croft is about to learn a very expensive lesson about the importance of knowing who your friends' friends are. He has mistaken a man of quiet substance for a man of no consequence. A fatal error in judgment. I was hoping you might see it that way, I said, a sense of grim satisfaction settling in. What do you need from me, Henry? He asked. It wasn't a question of if he would help, only how. A meeting, I replied. At the gallery. Tomorrow morning. Say 10 o'clock, just a few hours before the wedding. I believe Mr. Croft would move heaven and earth for a last-minute private meeting with you. He would see it as the ultimate validation, the final jewel in his crown before the wedding. And he would be correct, Alistair mused. The sheer arrogance of taking such a meeting on his wedding day would appeal to him. He would see it as a power move. Excellent. And you will be there? I will be there, I confirmed. And I also have another guest I would like you to meet. A woman named Jessica Marlowe. A woman with a story of her own that I believe provides essential context to Mr. Croft's character. Consider it done, Alistair said without hesitation. Graves will make the call immediately. The bait will be irresistible. Tell me, Henry, just for my own curiosity, what's the book? The wedding gift you mentioned. I looked at the worn, leather-bound volume on my desk, its faded gold lettering catching the lamplight. Wuthering Heights, I said. Alistair chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that was both appreciative and menacing. How perfectly, devastatingly appropriate. A tale of consuming passion that destroys all it touches. You always did have a flair for the symbolic, my friend. I look forward to our little piece of theater tomorrow. The morning of the wedding dawned, gray and overcast, a fitting backdrop for the quiet storm that was about to break. I slept surprisingly well. The decision once made had granted me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer a passive victim of my daughter's ambition. I was an active participant in a narrative of my own making. I dressed carefully, not in a somber suit of mourning, but in my favorite tweed jacket, a crisp white shirt, and a tie the color of old burgundy. I was not attending a wedding. I was attending a reckoning, and one should dress appropriately for the occasion. Tucked into my leather satchel was the first edition of Wuthering Heights, its presence a silent, final judgment. My phone buzzed at exactly 9:05 a.m. It was Ellie. Her voice was artificially bright, the kind of cheerfulness that barely conceals a guilty conscience. "Dad, just wanted to call and see how you were doing. I know last night was difficult." "I'm quite all right, Eleanor," I said, using her full name. I knew it irked her. It sounded too old-fashioned for her new life. "And how are you? Are you excited for your big day?" "Oh, completely. It's going to be perfect." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "And you will not believe what happened. Sebastian just got a call from Alistair Finch's office. Mr. Finch wants a private meeting with him this morning at the gallery. Can you believe it? On our wedding day. It's a sign, Dad. It's a sign that we're finally making it, that we're moving into a different league." I had to admire the sheer, unadulterated hubris of it all. "A work emergency on his wedding day? That's dedication," I said, my voice dry. "Exactly. It's for a huge new client, the kind that could change everything for us. I can't say the name, it's all very confidential, but it's massive. Sebastian is over there now, handling it. So professional, you know." Her voice was filled with pride, completely oblivious to the fact that she was boasting about the very trap I had set. "Well, you tell Sebastian that I wish him the best of luck with his meeting," I said. "And Ellie, I hope you get everything you deserve today." The double meaning was lost on her entirely. "Thanks, Dad. That means so much. I have to go. The makeup artist is here. I'll call you after the honeymoon." She hung up, a daughter absolving herself of guilt, confident that her inconvenient father had been safely placated and shelved. I arrived at the gallery a little before 10. It was a stark white space, filled with abstract art that felt loud and meaningless to me. Jessica was already there, waiting nervously in a small cafe area. She looked different from the weary woman on the phone. Today, she was dressed in a sharp, professional blazer, her hair pulled back, her eyes clear and determined. She had come prepared for battle. "Thank you for doing this," I said, sitting across from her. "Thank you," she replied, her voice firm. "For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I'm not crazy. For 2 years, he made me believe the failure was mine. Today, he gets to own it." The gallery doors opened, and Sebastian Croft strode in, radiating an aura of supreme self-importance. He was already in his wedding tuxedo, his hair perfectly coiffed. He checked his ridiculously expensive watch, looking annoyed at being made to wait. He was a man on a tight schedule, a man about to conquer the world, and this meeting was just one more item on his checklist. His eyes scanned the room looking for Alistair Finch. Instead, they landed on me. Confusion flickered across his face, quickly followed by irritation. And then he saw Jessica sitting beside me. The transformation was instantaneous and fascinating to watch. The confident swagger evaporated. The color drained from his face. He looked like a man who had walked into a board meeting and found himself facing a firing squad. Sebastian stood frozen in the center of the gallery, a perfect black and white figure against the stark, colorless walls. He looked like a character in a play who had just walked onto the wrong set, the background suddenly hostile and alien. The worlds he had worked so hard to keep separate, the polished, ambitious future he was marrying into, and the messy, inconvenient past he had discarded, had just collided with the force of a tectonic shift. His meticulously planned day, his triumphant ascent, had just veered violently off course. He stared at us, his perfectly composed features struggling to process the scene. His gaze flickered from me to Jessica, then back again, the cogs of his quick, calculating mind whirring, trying to find a logical explanation for this impossible tableau. There wasn't one. "This is a joke," he finally said, the words coming out as a strangled bark. He was trying for a laugh, an assertion of dominance, but it caught in his throat. He looked directly at me, his eyes narrowing with accusation. "Is this your idea of a wedding prank, Henry? It's in poor taste, even for you." Before I could respond, he turned his full, venomous attention on Jessica. The mask of the charming financier fell away, revealing the ugly sneer beneath. "And you," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "I don't know what he paid you to be here, but the performance is over. You need to leave. Now." Jessica didn't flinch. She had spent 2 years replaying their last conversations in her mind, 2 years being haunted by his dismissive cruelty. She was inoculated against his venom now. She met his gaze with a cool, level strength I doubt he had ever seen in her. "He didn't pay me anything, Sebastian," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the gallery's quiet hum. "I'm here for free. You could call it a pro bono consultation. I'm here to offer my services as a character witness for Mr. Finch's benefit." The mention of Alistair's name was like a physical blow. It stopped him cold. He couldn't dismiss her. He couldn't call security. Not if there was even a whisper of a chance that this was somehow connected to the meeting he so desperately coveted. "Sebastian, please sit," I said again, my voice calm and reasonable, leaving no room for argument. "You have a very important meeting scheduled. You wouldn't want to be flustered when Mr. Finch arrives, would you?" "We're just here to prepare you." He was trapped. I could see the frantic calculations in his eyes. Storming out would mean forfeiting the meeting of a lifetime, the deal that would catapult him into the stratosphere. Staying meant stepping into this ambush. With a look of pure, unadulterated hatred directed at me, he stiffly pulled out a chair from a nearby table and sat, perching on the very edge as if the seat were hot. "Fine," he snapped, his voice a low, furious hiss. "You have 5 minutes. I am timing you. Then I am calling security and having you both escorted from the premises." "I doubt that will be necessary," I said smoothly. I looked at Jessica and gave her a slight, encouraging nod. The floor was hers. She took a steadying breath, her hands clasped on the table in front of her. She wasn't the weeping, broken woman he had left behind. She was a creditor, here to collect a debt that had nothing to do with money. "2 years ago, Sebastian," she began, "on the night you ended our engagement, you told me that my freelance design business was charming but insignificant. That was the word you used, insignificant. You said that if I truly loved you, I would understand that you needed a partner whose social standing could match your ambition. You didn't just end our 3-year relationship, you systematically dismantled my confidence, convincing me that I was the reason you weren't succeeding faster." "This is ancient history," Sebastian hissed, his eyes darting around the empty gallery as if the abstract paintings on the walls were whispering about him. "She's a bitter ex-girlfriend, Henry. This is pathetic. Bringing her here on my wedding day, is it?" Jessica continued, her voice unwavering, cutting him off cleanly. "Is it pathetic that I used my own savings to support us for the first year you were trying to get your firm off the ground? That I designed your company's first logo and all your initial marketing materials for free? That I was the one who sat up with you all night when you lost that first big client, telling you that you could do it, that you had what it takes?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes boring into his. "You didn't just leave me, Sebastian. You tried to erase me. You told our mutual friends that I had become unstable and clingy. You poisoned my reputation to justify your own ruthless ambition. You didn't just want a new life. You wanted to ensure my old one was in ruins, so no one would ever question your narrative." Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall of truth around him that he couldn't escape. His face was a shifting mask of rage and panic. He was looking at me now, his eyes pleading and furious at the same time. "What is the point of this, Henry? To drag up old, pathetic drama on my wedding day? What kind of sick, twisted game is this?" "This isn't a game," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "It's a due diligence meeting, a character audit." "A character audit?" Sebastian scoffed, though the sound lacked conviction. He was trying to regain control, to frame this as an absurdity, but the trap was too well constructed. "What gives you the right?" "You did, Sebastian," I replied, my voice remaining level, a calm counterpoint to his rising panic. "You gave me the right last night when you and my daughter decided that my 65 years of life, my character, my very identity as her father, was a liability to your brand. You made my character an issue, so I decided to return the favor and examine yours." I let that statement hang in the air for a moment, letting him absorb the direct link between his actions and this consequence. You see, when Alistair Finch agrees to a meeting, he expects to be dealing with a person of substance. He is a man who believes, as I do, that past behavior is the most reliable predictor of future performance. He values integrity and honor above all things. He has a particular distaste for men who build their success on the backs of others, only to kick them away when they are no longer needed. I saw him flinch. The parallel was undeniable. "So when I considered what to tell him about you," I continued, "I felt it was my duty to be thorough. I started with your history. Ms. Marlowe was kind enough to share her story. It's a compelling narrative, don't you think? A story of a man who discards a loyal, loving partner the moment he perceives she is no longer beneficial to his ambitions." I leaned forward, my voice dropping slightly. "Does that pattern sound familiar to you, Sebastian?" "She's lying." It was a mutual breakup. "She couldn't handle the pressure of my career," he sputtered, his arguments becoming weaker, more frantic. He was resorting to his old practiced lies, but they sounded hollow and desperate in this quiet, sterile room. "Was it?" I asked calmly. "And I suppose my daughter Eleanor mutually decided that her own father was too much of an embarrassment to be seen at her wedding reception. Was it a mutual decision that my life's work, the very thing that paid for her education and gave her a love of art, was now just social dissonance?" His jaw worked, but no words came out. He was finally seeing the full, horrifying picture. This wasn't a random act of spite. This was a calculated, strategic demolition. Every word was a charge being laid at the foundation of the life he was trying to build. He had underestimated me at every turn. He saw me as a gentle, absent-minded old man, a relic to be managed. He never imagined I would have the intellect, the resources, or the sheer will to orchestrate something like this. "You see, Sebastian," I said, my voice softening not with pity, but with the cold clarity of a final judgment. "You made a fundamental error in your calculations. You looked at me and saw an old, irrelevant bookseller. You dismissed my world as small and insignificant. You saw a quiet life and mistook it for a weak one. You never thought to ask about my friends. You never considered that the quiet, dusty world of books might intersect with your shiny, ruthless world of high finance. You assumed I was powerless." I paused and gave him a sad, weary smile. "That was your mistake. You tried to edit me out of your story. You failed to realize I was in a position to edit you out of your own." He stared at me, the full weight of his miscalculation finally crashing down on him. The meeting with Finch wasn't a prize to be won. It was the executioner's block, and he had willingly, eagerly, placed his own head upon it. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen of pure terror. He looked from me to Jessica and back again. He saw no sympathy, no weakness to exploit. He saw only the calm, implacable faces of his past and his future, united in judgment against him. His carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and disrespect, was about to be utterly and completely annihilated. And the architect of his destruction was the one man he had been arrogant enough to deem a loser. Just as Sebastian seemed to shrink into his chair, a man utterly defeated by the truth, the grand glass doors of the gallery swung open with a soft, hydraulic hiss. A man in an impeccably tailored suit, radiating an aura of quiet, immense power, strode in. He wasn't flanked by security or assistance. He didn't need them. His presence alone commanded the space, silencing the ambient hum of the building. It was Alistair Finch. He didn't even glance at Sebastian, who had shot to his feet, a desperate, sycophantic smile plastered on his terrified face. Alistair's eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room and found me immediately. A warm, genuine smile transformed his stern features. He walked directly to our table, his hand outstretched, bypassing Sebastian as if he were a piece of modern art he found particularly uninteresting. "Henry, my dear friend," he boomed, his voice rich and full of life. He didn't shake my hand. He grasped my shoulder with genuine affection, a gesture of familiar camaraderie that was more damning to Sebastian than any insult could be. 15 years of letters, and you're even more distinguished than I imagined. It is a true honor to finally meet you in person." Sebastian froze, his ingratiating smile collapsing. His face became a canvas of raw disbelief and dawning horror. The man he had spent months trying to impress, the mythical billionaire, the key to his entire future, was embracing the embarrassing old bookseller he had just dismissed. The two worlds he thought were light years apart had just merged in the most catastrophic way possible. He was a footnote in a story he didn't even know he was a part of. Alistair then turned his attention to Jessica, his eyes softening with courtesy and respect. "And you must be Ms. Marlowe," he said, taking her hand gently. "Henry has told me a great deal about your courage and integrity. It is a privilege to meet you." Only then, after acknowledging us both, did he finally turn his gaze upon Sebastian. The warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by a look as cold and hard as granite. He looked Sebastian up and down, a silent, withering assessment that stripped away every layer of the younger man's carefully constructed facade. "Mr. Croft," he said finally, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I was told you were a man of vision and ambition. It seems I was misinformed." "Mr. Finch, sir." "I can explain," Sebastian stammered, his face pale and slick with a sudden sheen of sweat. This is a misunderstanding, a personal matter." "A personal matter?" Alistair repeated, one eyebrow arching with dangerous curiosity. "You believe that a man's character is a personal matter, separate from his business dealings? You believe the way a man treats those he perceives as lesser than himself has no bearing on his professional integrity? That is a very modern philosophy. It is not, however, one that I share." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, confidential tone that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "Let me tell you what I believe, Mr. Croft. I believe that a man who would discard a loyal partner the moment a more advantageous opportunity presents itself is a man who cannot be trusted in a negotiation. I believe that a man who would encourage his fiancée to cast her own father aside like a piece of unwanted furniture is a man who lacks the fundamental decency required for any long-term partnership." He paused, letting the words hang in the silent gallery. "I do not invest in balance sheets, Mr. Croft. I invest in people, and you, sir, are a very poor investment." Alistair looked at me then, a question in his eyes. "Henry, your daughter, Eleanor, she is a knowing party to this lack of character?" I felt a pang of a pain I thought had died, the last ghost of paternal love. "She made her choice, Alistair," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy but true. "She chose him, and this world he promised her." Alistair nodded. Slowly, a look of profound disappointment on his face. He turned back to Sebastian, his final judgment delivered with the quiet efficiency of a master executioner. "Mr. Croft, my interest in any potential business relationship with you, or any entity you represent, is, as of this moment, terminated. Furthermore, I am the primary patron of this gallery. I will be having a conversation with the board of directors this afternoon about the questionable judgment of their management in associating with individuals of your caliber. I suspect your fiancé's position here may become untenable. He had just destroyed 2 careers with a few calm sentences. And finally, Alistair said, a final parting shot, I was, believe it or not, planning to attend your wedding this afternoon as a gesture of goodwill to this gallery. I must now, of course, withdraw. I have no desire to celebrate a union built on such a rotten foundation. I trust my absence and the reasons for it will be noted. Alistair turned his back on Sebastian completely, a final brutal dismissal that was more profound than any physical blow. The titan of industry was done with him. The interview was over. Now, Henry, he said, his voice warm again as if nothing had happened. Tell me, did you bring the book? The shift in tone was dizzying. It relegated Sebastian to complete and utter irrelevance. I reached into my leather satchel and placed the old, leather-bound copy of Wuthering Heights on the table between us. The book, my intended wedding gift, now felt like a final exhibit in a trial that had just concluded. Alistair picked it up with the reverence only a true bibliophile can possess, his fingers tracing the gilded, faded title. Magnificent? He breathed, opening it to the inscribed page. A story of a love so powerful it destroys everything it touches. How tragically fitting, Henry. You truly are a poet, even in your retribution. While Alistair was examining the book, Sebastian was imploding. He made a small choking sound, a noise of pure animal panic. He looked at the closed doors of the gallery, then back at us, his mind racing, trying to find a move, any move, in a game he had already lost so completely. His entire future, the deal, the wedding, the social ascension, had just been wiped from the board. He lunged toward the table, his eyes wild. You can't do this, he hissed at Alistair. The deal is solid. The financials are perfect. Alistair didn't even look up from the book. The financials are irrelevant when the management is morally bankrupt, Mr. Croft. Goodbye. With that, Sebastian seemed to break. He turned, not walking but stumbling, and fled from the gallery, a man running from the ghost of his own future. He was running to the wedding, running to Ellie. Perhaps he thought he could still salvage something, that he could marry her before the news broke, locking in at least some semblance of the life he'd planned. It was the desperate final move of a cornered fool. Jessica watched him go, not with triumph, but with a quiet, somber sense of closure. She stood up, her composure absolute. Thank you, Mr. Finch. And thank you, Henry. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a gratitude that was deeper than words. You didn't just expose him. You gave me my story back. You made me realize I wasn't insignificant. With a final, dignified nod, she too walked out, leaving the past behind her for good. The gallery was quiet again. It was just me and Alistair. Well, he said, closing the book gently. That was rather more dramatic than our usual correspondence about 19th century binding techniques. He looked at me, his expression softening with deep concern. Your daughter, Henry, this will destroy her. She is the architect of her own destruction, Alistair, I said, the words feeling heavy but true. I only provided the mirror for her to see the blueprints. Just then, my phone, which I had placed on the table, began to ring. It was a frantic, buzzing shriek that cut through the gallery's silence. The caller ID read, Ellie. Of course. Sebastian would have called her from his car, his voice a torrent of panic and blame, trying to spin the narrative, trying to cast me as the villain who had sabotaged him for no reason. I looked at the screen, at my daughter's name. For a moment, the father in me, the man who had read her bedtime stories and bandaged her scraped knees, felt a pang of pity. But it was quickly replaced by the memory of her cold eyes in the restaurant. "It's best if you don't come." I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. Then I declined the immediate callback and switched my phone to silent. "It seems my work here is done," I said. "Thank you, my friend, for everything." "Nonsense," Alistair said, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "What are friends for, if not to occasionally assist in the strategic dismantling of arrogant young fools who mistake kindness for weakness? Now, you will not be going back to that empty apartment to brood. You will be coming with me. My chef makes an excellent lunch, and we have 15 years of conversation to catch up on. We can start with the finer points of this exquisite binding." He picked up the copy of Wuthering Heights. "A truly inspired choice, Henry. Truly." He was steering me toward the door when it burst open again. It was Ellie. She was a vision of chaos. Her wedding dress, a cloud of white silk and lace worth more than my car, was slightly askew. Her elaborate updo was coming undone, wisps of hair framing a face streaked with tears and running mascara. She looked like a tragic heroine from one of the Victorian novels I loved, a woman whose world had just collapsed. "Dad!" she cried out, her voice breaking. Her eyes, wild and desperate, darted from me to the imposing figure of Alistair Finch. She clearly didn't recognize him, seeing only a wealthy, powerful man standing with her father, a scene that didn't fit the narrative she had constructed. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice rising to a near hysterical pitch. She took a step towards me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Sebastian just called me. He was screaming. He said you sabotaged him, that you ruined everything. You brought his ex-girlfriend here? On my wedding day? How could you be so cruel?" Alistair took a protective step forward, placing himself slightly between us, a silent guardian. But I held up a hand, stopping him. This was between me and my daughter. "Cruel?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You want to speak of cruelty, Eleanor?" I took a step towards her, closing the distance. For the first time, she seemed to see me, really see me. Not as the doddering old man, but as the source of this earthquake that had just shattered her life. She flinched. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice low and intense, each word carefully enunciated. "Not money, not things. Those are cheap. I gave you the things that matter. I gave you a love of stories. I gave you a respect for history. I gave you the intellectual curiosity that got you into one of the finest art programs in the country. I nurtured your mind and your spirit. I gave you the very foundation upon which you built the career that made you attractive to a man like Sebastian Croft." I pointed to Alistair. "This man, this powerful man you are so desperate to impress, is not here because of your fiancé's business acumen. He is here because he and I have been corresponding for 15 years about rare books and shared philosophies. He is my friend. The world you were so desperate to enter, the one you thought I was keeping you from? I have been a quiet citizen of that world all along, a world of substance, not of surface." The truth hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The man she had deemed an embarrassment was friends with the man she considered a god. The logic of her world had crumbled. "You speak of cruelty?" I continued, pressing my advantage, my voice growing stronger. "Was it not cruel to tell your own father he was not welcome at your wedding? To dismiss a lifetime of love and sacrifice, because you were worried it might clash with the decor? You didn't just hurt me, Eleanor. You dishonored the memory of your mother. You took everything she and I valued, honesty, loyalty, intellect, and you traded it all away for a man who values nothing but himself." I reached into my satchel and pulled out the book. I didn't hand it to her. I held it up between us. "This was to be your wedding gift," I said. "Your great-grandmother's copy of your mother's favorite novel, a piece of your history, a symbol of the love that created you. But you don't deserve it." You don't deserve her memory. You have become one of the characters she would have pitied. A woman so blinded by ambition she cannot see the ruin standing right in front of her. Tears were streaming down her face now, not of anger, but of a dawning, devastating understanding. "Dad, I'm sorry," she whispered. "No," I said, my voice softening, but with no trace of forgiveness. "You're not sorry, Eleanor. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry you chose the losing side. You are sorry your ugly calculations were exposed. That is not the same thing as remorse." I turned my back on her. "Alistair," I said, my voice returning to its normal, calm tone. "I believe you mentioned lunch." As we walked towards the door, I could hear her sobbing behind us, a desperate, broken sound. The sound of a woman who had just realized she had sold her soul for a kingdom that had just turned to ash. I did not look back. That daughter, the one who made that choice, was no longer mine to comfort. The climax was over. Her world had been unmade. Now, she would have to learn to live in the one she had truly earned. The lunch with Alistair was a surreal affair. We sat in the quiet, sunlit dining room of his penthouse overlooking the city, the chaos of the morning feeling a world away. We didn't speak of Ellie or Sebastian again. Instead, we fell into the easy, familiar comfort of our 15-year correspondence. We talked about a newly discovered manuscript by a forgotten poet, the politics of a recent auction at Christie's, and the enduring power of a well-told story. It was a conversation between equals, a reaffirmation of the world I belonged to, a world where value was measured in knowledge and integrity, not stock prices and social connections. As the afternoon drew to a close, Alistair looked at me over his glass of wine. "Henry," he said, "I have been thinking. My private library has become disorganized, a chaotic collection of treasures. It needs a guiding hand, a curator, someone with your expertise and passion to bring it to order, to create a true legacy. The position would, of course, come with a significant salary and a residence on the estate." It was a generous offer, a lifeline to a different kind of life. A year ago, I might have considered it, but the events of the day had changed me. I was no longer a man content to live quietly among his books. A fire had been rekindled. "Alistair, my friend," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips, "I am deeply honored, but I have realized that my work is not finished. There are too many Sebastians in this world and too many Jessicas. Too many good people being told their stories are insignificant." I thought of the book in my satchel. I think perhaps it is time I started my own collection. Not of books, but of stories. Stories that need to be heard. He nodded, a look of deep understanding in his eyes. "Then you will need funding. Consider my foundation your first patron." The news of the canceled wedding and Sebastian's spectacular fall from grace was the talk of the city for weeks. As Alistair had predicted, the story spread like wildfire, whispered at charity galas and analyzed in boardrooms. Sebastian Croft became a cautionary tale, a synonym for hubris and bad character. His career was irrevocably destroyed. Ellie was fired from the gallery, her name now toxic by association. Their relationship, built on the shifting sands of ambition and social climbing, couldn't survive the storm of reality. I heard through the grapevine that their breakup was as ugly and vicious as their rise had been celebrated. They turned on each other, each blaming the other for their downfall. 2. Drowning people pulling each other under. I did not see my daughter for almost a year. She didn't call, and I didn't reach out. The line had been drawn. During that year, I, with Alistair's backing and Jessica Marlowe as my first employee, established the Clark Foundation for Narrative Justice. It was a unique organization. We offered pro bono help to victims of fraud, workplace harassment, and social manipulation, people whose lives had been damaged by powerful figures who controlled the narrative. We were a small team of investigators, lawyers, and storytellers who fought back not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion and corporate governance, using meticulously researched facts to expose the truth. We gave a voice to the voiceless. One rainy afternoon, a year after the canceled wedding, the bell above my bookshop door chimed. The shop was quieter now. I had hired a manager as my foundation work took up most of my time. But I still spent my afternoons here. It was my anchor. I looked up from the rare manuscript I was examining and saw her standing there. She was thinner, paler. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn raincoat. Her hair was pulled back, in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked like the girl I remembered, the girl from before college, before Sebastian, before the hunger for a different life had consumed her. She looked like herself. "Dad," she said, her voice small, hesitant, as if unsure of her welcome. Didn't say anything. I just waited. The next move had to be hers. The bookshop. "It's just as I remember it," she whispered, looking around at the towering shelves of stories that had been her first home. "Some things don't change, Eleanor," I said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes, tears that looked different from the panicked, angry tears I had last seen. These were tears of genuine sorrow. I was wrong," she said, the words sounding like they had been caught in her throat for a year. "I threw everything away, everything that mattered. For what? For him? For a life that wasn't even real. It was just a story he told, and I was so desperate to believe it." She took a shaky step forward. "I lost myself, Dad, and I lost you. I thought of the pain of the last year, the cold dismissal, the casual cruelty. I thought of the strong, purposeful man I had become in the wake of that pain. My justice had never been about her destruction. It had been about forcing her to find her own truth, to write her own story instead of starring in someone else's cheap production. The stories were here all along, Ellie," I said, gesturing to the silent, waiting books that surrounded us. "You just chose to read the wrong one for a while." I walked out from behind my counter and stood before her. Not as a judge, but as a father. A father to a woman, not a girl. A new chapter is a difficult thing to write. It requires honesty. It requires you to understand the characters, and it starts on the very first page. I didn't offer her money. I didn't offer her a home. I offered her something far more valuable and far more difficult. I handed her a dusty apron from a hook behind the counter. "The afternoon shift is about to start," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "The new arrivals need to be cataloged. If you want to find your way back, this is where you begin. Among the stories, the real ones. You can start by earning your own." I took the apron, her fingers closing around the worn fabric as if it were a lifeline. She looked down at it, then back up at me, a flicker of the daughter I thought I had lost forever in her eyes. It was not forgiveness. It was not a happy ending. It was simply a beginning. The first, difficult page of a new story. And for the first time in a very long time, I was hopeful I would want to read the next chapter. And that's how Henry, with wisdom and integrity, taught his daughter the most valuable lesson. True worth isn't found in what you own, but in the story you choose to live. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next meaningful story.